Welcome to the Growth Plus Exit podcast, where owners of privately held middle market companies talk about founding, scaling, and exiting their businesses successfully. Learn how to maximize and monetize your business on your own terms. Let's get started.
Hello, I'm Heather Bennett, your host for the Growth Plus Exit podcast, featuring middle market owners and experts talking about founding, growing, scaling, and exiting their businesses on their own terms. Past guests include Whitney Opperman, General Manager of Opperman & Sons, Matt Vukoff, co-founder and CEO of TalentCraft, and Kelly Shroud, founder and chairman of Data Vision. This episode is brought to you by Newport LLC, a team of seasoned executives who help CEOs of privately held companies grow, de-risk, scale, and exit their businesses successfully. Newport LLC is a winner of the prestigious Inc. Magazine 2025 Power Partner Award, a list of elite B2B companies from across the globe. To see the entire list, visit inc.com/Power Partner Awards. To learn more about Newport, visit us at newportllc.com or find us, of course, on LinkedIn. Before introducing today's guest, I would like to thank the many colleagues Rob and I have in common for introducing us, too many to list. Today's guest is Rob Stepen. Rob is a seasoned operator and strategic advisor known for helping founders turn early traction into disciplined, scalable growth. With deep experience across many different fields and expertise, Rob has guided multiple companies through the critical inflection points that define the founder journey, building systems, strengthening teams, and creating the operational clarity that fuels sustainable growth. Today, he works closely with business owners and investors through his job with Insperity to help handle, I'll say, a lot of challenges in the business world. In addition, Rob has a band called, his band is called The Generations, and they perform in the Chicagoland area. And I had the pleasure of getting to sing with them a few times. So, Rob, welcome to the show.
It's such a pleasure to be here, Heather. And sorry about the lights. That happens every so often when there's no movement. So I apologize.
Oh, smart tech buildings are where it's at. I love it.
Yes.
I love it.
Totally.
So let's get right into you as a founder, because I described a lot of the work that you're doing right now, but I want to hear your founder story. How did that get started?
So my journey started actually in corporate America. And I worked for the Quaker Oats company, which became Pepsi. And I started like ground level and worked my way to corporate, managing about $450 million worth of Quaker Oats instant oatmeal business on a cross-functional team. I was a national trade marketing manager for Quaker. Then I went to IRI, Information Resources, as a associate director there, calling on ConAgra, Alberto Culver, and Keebler. After that, went to Advo Direct Mail Marketing as a director, calling on SuperValue, JCPenney, and Caribou Coffee. Then I decided I had that entrepreneurial itch, and I decided to open up my own business. And I, grew it from ground level to, I think at the height, we had 22 people working for us. So my cousin and I started it. It was in janitorial, sanitation, and maintenance supplies, focusing on food safety sanitation. So the verticals that we competed in were things like retail, grocery. We also had healthcare, hospitality, and education. Those were the four verticals that were predominant. And we worked with people like Whole Foods. We had, regional contracts with those guys. SuperValue was another big client, and a bunch of players in the healthcare space. So I was so fortunate to get experience through the whole M&A journey, if you would. I opened this up with my cousin. We started to scale the business. As part of the growth plan of scaling, we acquired a firm. We also had some channel partnerships, and then we merged with another firm. And then finally, after 22 years of being in that space, wound up selling. And then I went back into corporate America, working for IFMA, the International Food Service Manufacturers Association, as the marketing director, focusing on digital marketing, which is really hot now. That digital is where it's at. And then after that, I wound up in supply chain, and that's where I found Insperity, because I was a client of Insperity before coming to Insperity. So I've really come full circle to be a business performance advisor for my clients.
Excellent. I love hearing that story. And I know we've been very lucky on the show to have a number of excellent, we'll say, marketing field founders, Stephen Brent May and Hami Arrington, Mark Beelan, Tim Paget, and of course, Scott Markman. So really, really exceptional marketing leaders. So it's good to hear about your experience. So when you were building that company, and you said you went up to like 22, and I know Insperity is such a people-focused business. What was it like determining when and how to hire and bring on new people for that business?
That is a wonderful question. So as we were growing and we would sign contracts, we would have to have people, to fulfill certain roles and responsibilities within those contracts. So as an example, I remember when 9/11 hit, everybody has that memory, like, where were you when that hit? What happened back then is I had to pivot, Heather, because, all of a sudden businesses were going down, and some of them were tanking, and the sky's falling, and you didn't know there was so much uncertainty in the world. And so I had this idea. I said, in food safety sanitation, what's really important is getting trained. So I wound up training like 1,000 Whole Foods employees, myself and my team. And so I thought, wouldn't it be cool to have a just-in-time delivery system and training, and then servicing the stores of whether it's Whole Foods or Super Value or some other grocery stores or restaurants, and having like an account service manager. I created this brand new position, account service manager, that would have a truck and have product in the truck and have tools in the truck, and then go around to all the sections. Let's say at a Whole Foods, it's prepared foods and meat and seafood and produce and cheese and all these different departments, and make sure all the equipment, dispensing equipment for the chemicals, work properly. There was so being proactive instead of reacting to at Saturday night, the sky's falling. So we didn't have to have those type of situations, but also they do a just-in-time replenishment, with all the products that they purchase from us. And then that person would also do training. So maybe there's some new hires at Whole Foods that, or Super Value, that needed training. And so this person was like a Jack or Jill of all trades. And I had to go hire for that, so I had to staff up, because all of a sudden we're in 11 different states. We go from being in Chicagoland area, maybe into Wisconsin, to 11 different states in the whole Midwest. And I had to staff up. And that was an example to your question of, hey, how did you know when to staff up? Well, I knew because I came up with this model, and I didn't know how it would work, but it was very successful.
And when you were looking for that jack of all trades, that person who can really do a lot, think on their feet, be able to, when you were interviewing them, what were you looking for in their responses or on their resume that told you they'd be able to handle that agile and flexible of a position?
So the first thing, they had to be a people person, because, they were the face of my company. And if you didn't have the right person, if you had somebody that didn't have those type of skills, that wouldn't fly, because I'd be getting calls left, right, and center saying, who is this person? And so being a people person was number one. Being somebody that was flexible, because you just never knew what kind of issues that were at the store level or at the account level. And then you had to pivot. You had to take care of things. If their dishwasher didn't work, you had to know how to fix the dishwasher. And so there's all these different things. And then mechanical, they definitely had to have that mechanical background. They had to have some sense of how they would train people. So, and they didn't have to have that all coming into my company. I actually trained a lot of them, and I did like real training at the site. So that as that became more ingrained in their head, it was like second nature to them. And then they had to know how to use, I think we had like iPads at that time. So they had to, or something like that. They had to, have some technical expertise as well. And those were some of the critical components of how a successful account service manager, or we call them ASMs, would be.
That's cool. That is really cool. So, you're growing the company, and you don't just grow the company by people. Talk about your endeavors into the world of acquisition.
Sure. So, when you have a growth plan, you have to think about, am I going to grow the company organically? How is that going to work? Are you going to do it through acquisition? Because when we acquired this firm, when we were interviewing different firms throughout, I'd say the first probably 5 to 7 years of our existence, they had to check some boxes. And even firms wanted to merge with us at that time, and that happened later on in the life cycle of the business. So when I thought about acquisitions, what is their culture like? The people coming over to my company, how are they going to align properly? And that was like really big for me, culture. And now it is too through Insperity, that's like another biggie, for us. But then also, I had to dive into the numbers. I actually had a third party, gentleman, that would help me for all the analytics and make sure that, number one, it met the needs, ground level, but where's that going to be down the road? Like do some projections 3 to 5 years out. How is it going to look, and how's it going to add, to my company's financials? What is the EBITDA going to look like, down the road? And, obviously, as growing the top line, and this, from your business, is it, what kind of efficiencies are you going to get? Because, now you're 1 + 1 = 3 type of thing, where, you can get some buying power too. And now we're at a different level to buy at. And so those are things that were really important, at that time. And then, what kind of equipment do you have? Do you have any trucks? Do you have stuff that will help our warehouse? And what type of lines of products do your customers have versus our customers? And are there any lines of products that we can take on that will enhance our portfolio and grow our portfolio? And then people would say, oh my God, that's pretty cool. You have, this chemical, or you have this towel and tissue, program. So those are the kind of things that we looked at when we were interviewing. And then finally, when we made the acquisition.
All right. So then we talked about acquisition. How about merger and exit? So what happened with the company?
So on the merger, the thought was we were not strong, with my company in healthcare. This company was very strong in healthcare, and we merged the companies together. So we were really strong in retail grocery. We were really strong in hospitality as well as education. So that added a component that we did not have. And so there was over like a couple hundred accounts. At one point, we were over 1,000 accounts as a company. And so that really helped and get us into different verticals. And then they were in a few other verticals too, but that was the major one. And then there were two partners that came on with me, so there were three partners total. And then they brought on a staff of people as well. Now, what happened was we didn't really need this huge staff, so we could consolidate that, moving forward. And then obviously from the acquisition and then the merger, there were more salespeople because you always want, like, who's going to have a book of business and what are you going to do with that book of business? So those were all factors in both the acquisition and the merger. And so when we got to a point where I would say in 2016, there was a lot of changes that were going on. In the state of Illinois, the state was broke. They weren't paying the health care. And so cash is king. And if my clients are getting paid and we're not getting paid, for a period of time, not forever, but, you'd want people to pay you within your terms. However, if Illinois is not paying these facilities, and these entities, that really put a crimp on things. So knowing that everybody wanted to get into janitorial supplies, all these big box stores. And so that was hurting margin. And then Whole Foods got acquired. That was a big client of ours. So they got acquired by Amazon back then. And so then we started looking about, okay, let's start the whole selling process. And that's how that whole, those three components really had us look at that.
Yeah, those are some major shifts in the marketplace,
Yep.
For sure. And tell me about that process, because most people only go through the sale of a company once in their lives. So tell me about, like, how did you start it? What did you learn? What surprised you?
Well, I think the surprise was that I thought there'd be more people that were looking. We did interview a few people, and everybody, it was just tragic because they wanted to lowball things, and that wasn't a nice experience. When somebody just wanted to pay you, like, bottom line price. We wound up getting a decent sale, from our sale. But as we were going through the process of interviewing these different firms, some of them were really good. Some of them I could have seen myself working in, a long time, because they had great culture. They had great people that worked for them, great leadership. But who wants to, if they were going to lowball me then, who's to say what would happen down the road? Heather, and that wouldn't have been a fun experience. And then I had some family members that wanted to interview me. And so I thought that was more of a conflict. I didn't want to upset the apple cart going with some of the family members' organizations. And we wound up selling to a gentleman that actually was in healthcare, and he had owned healthcare facilities. And so the supply business was like adjacent and really helped him, so he didn't have to go find vendors, and he actually saved his margin on that as well.
Yeah, certainly acquiring in order to increase your vertical, never a bad thing. Never a bad thing with controlling costs. Very interesting. What do you wish, with Newport, a lot of the founders I work with and my partners work with, when we start talking about eventual exit, there's a lot of information they just don't know. Like I said, when you only go through this once in your life, what's, the likelihood you're going to understand the process ahead of time? What do you wish you would have known in order to be more capital ready for that process?
You're going to love this answer. I wish I was an Insperity client back then, because what Insperity does for those types of organizations, we actually get people moving, like to the top line. So if somebody really cares and values their employees, and we get involved with them in multiple ways, that's going to help grow your business, and that's going to get you the best bang for your buck when you're ready to sell. So, when you're looking through different inflection points in that journey, so to speak, if you are ready to sell, which we were at that time, and Insperity got our people to the next level. So as an example, maybe they could have trained our salespeople to be more effective and efficient and get more accounts and be more hunters out there to drive the top line. We would have got more money, at the very end. And so I wish, and then, Insperity would have that HR infrastructure. So I wouldn't need certain people that I think I was overstaffed in some of the areas. And so Insperity could have helped that as well. And it's not a plug for Insperity. It's actually true, because when I was a client of Insperity, I saw how efficient that the organization was and how we grew. We were 16 employees. We were like $72 million and before Insperity. And once Insperity came after 2.5 years, we grew to a little over 100 million. So like $28 million pop, to the top line really helped positive drop through to the bottom line. And so, comparing and contrasting, I didn't know about Insperity back then. So, it was funny because when I first came to Insperity, one of my colleagues, was talking to me and he said that, well, where did you work? And, I said, well, I wish I would have known Insperity. And the manager looked at my colleague, said, why weren't you calling on Rob way back then? So it was like really funny that had he had called him, I may never have been in Insperity. Insperity probably would have helped my company.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that because there's so many specific levers. There's like 4 or 5 very specific levers that you can push and pull in order to generate growth. And one of those is exactly what Insperity does, which is really focus on that people component. And so that's such a great example. Okay, so you've exited the business.
Yes.
What surprised you afterward? Because I've been hearing a lot of like fun conversations about you're the business owner, you've got this business, it's running great. You survived the due diligence and the process of going through M&A. What was that 1 or 2 years afterward like?
Well, I was between successes, and the surprise for me, Heather, was, okay, what's the next chapter in my life? And it was surprising that I thought I could just pick up right away, get somebody to, hire me or, and I thought about, hey, what's the next widget that I want to launch? And so what I did was I kind of did parallel paths. I had my own consulting company, RLS Consulting. And so I would actually consult on marketing for businesses. And then RLS morphed into the whole music scene, and the band is through that entity. But surprising, it was just so difficult for me to get the right job. And then I finally landed at IFMA, and IFMA was a great opportunity, a great springboard for me, because it got me back into doing marketing on a day-to-day basis and doing digital marketing and working with all these different companies. They were non-for-profit. They had members from big, CPG companies, that was my starting point with the Quaker Oats company. So I felt really good about that. But prior to that, the surprise was, okay, next. I had all these interviews and it was great. And I had recruiters call me. And here's an interesting story about connectivity that I think maybe your clients and your audience would like to hear about. I'm a firm believer in connecting the dots. So during that journey of, between successes, I had an interview, and it was a nice interview, nothing special. I was downtown, and I said to myself, I've never really seen the American Marketing Association. I've been a member of the American Marketing Association. I never saw it. So I called them up, said, hey, I'm downtown for an interview. Can I just tour your facility? Yeah, come on down. I'll take you on a tour. So I get there, and the person that was supposed to take me on a tour left for an early lunch. And there's this gentleman at the front desk, and I'm telling him, yeah, I want to take a tour. I've never seen the place. Been a member all these years. He said, I'll take you on a tour. Oh, great. He takes me on a tour. Like he shows me all these different rooms. They have different themes in the different rooms. Like Mad Men had their own room, and it was really cool. And so we start talking, and he was asking me about my background, and I said, oh yeah, I was a Quaker. He goes, oh, do you know so and so? I said, yeah, she ran Gatorade, and so we had some commonalities there. And at the end of the tour, we're talking. He said, do you ever volunteer here? So yeah, I'd like to. Yeah, I don't know anybody, at the organization. And so I said, by the way, what do you do? And he said, I'm the CEO. I'm like, oh, you're the CEO of the American Marketing Association for Chicago? He goes, no, I'm the CEO of all the American Marketing Associations. And my jaw dropped. And we start talking. He said, I'll tell you what, you start volunteering here and coming to more events, and I will connect you with somebody. And that's going to be a recruiter. And he did. He connected me with a recruiter, and that recruiter got me the job at IFMA. So you just never know what will happen. And now that was just, top of mind. Hey, I'm down here interviewing with this other company, and just making those connecting the dot, types of situations really helped me. And connecting the dots have always been, whether it's running my own company, whether it's getting clients, whether it's helping others out by helping them connect the dots. You've been at my events, and you see how I can connect people together. That's really, important to me, to pay it forward.
Absolutely. Okay. So speaking of paying it forward, who are your mentors, and what's the best advice you've ever received from a mentor?
Excellent question. So I've had multiple mentors throughout my whole life. When I started with the Quaker Oats company, Jim Coy, was one of my big mentors at Quaker. And he would always talk to me about really getting to know people, being curious. That was his big thing, being curious. And I still take that on, today, as, hey, whenever I talk to somebody, I want to know about their business. I want to know how they started their business. I want to know, what's important to them and how I could help them out. So that was one mentor at Quaker. The second mentor is Dave Bure. Dave Bure was the president of, I believe it was the foods division. And he often told me, he said, Rob, you got to work, you can't be like working on all these different projects. You got to focus on 2, maybe 3 things, but focus on these 2 projects and do it really well. And I still remember that today. And so those are people at Quaker, but I've had a series of mentors that, have taken me under their wings, that have coached me, even here at Insperity, my current regional manager, she always takes me under her wing. Maureen, she's just incredible, Maureen Logan, and she teaches me things that I never would have learned before. And so I appreciate that. But I'll tell you a story about somebody that made a very big impact on me early on in my career. And that was Payne Stewart. Payne was this champion golfer, and tragic thing happened to him later on. But I had an opportunity to do an event with the Quaker Oats company, the NFL, the PGA, where we took our clients to a golf course, and Payne and his team put on a clinic, and then we got a chance to golf with Payne and our clients and all that stuff. So I remember golfing with him at one of the holes, and I pulled him aside and said, Payne, my buddy Scott's doing better than me on this course. And he said, Rob, he's not doing better than you. He said, he has nothing to do with you. I said, yeah, but look at how well he's doing. He said, that's all on you. You get a chance to control what club to use, what ball to use, the conditions of the course, the weather conditions. You need to focus on yourself and not worrying about other people. And he said, you take this lesson in golf and you apply it to business and don't care about anybody else and how they're doing and how well they're doing. You just focus on yourself and control what you can control. And that that has gone with me my whole career, whether owning a business, whether working for somebody. I applaud people and congratulate them, but I don't get that in my headspace. I good for them. I'm just worrying about myself, and that probably is one of the best advice that I've ever received from somebody.
That is terrific advice. And yes, focus is absolutely key to getting things done. I have one last question, but before I ask it, I want to make sure that our audience knows that you can be reached through LinkedIn, Rob Stepen. And then last question, what is a hard lesson you learned while starting and growing your business that you wish you could share with future CEOs and business owners to help them more successfully grow their businesses?
It's all about the people. And if you get the right people and the right team together, then you can grow at a greater clip than if you have the wrong people. And if you let the people stay longer, which I did because I became too loyal, I believe that they weren't the right fit. And I for whatever reason, I was focused on something else, and I really should have been focused more on the people at that time. And it was like a wake up call for me, Heather, that once I got the right team in place, we were humming like a well-oiled machine. And it took a while to get there, but once we did, it was exponential, in terms of our growth. And I would just say, make sure that you treat them well, because if you don't treat them well, they're going to look somewhere else. So you want to have a strategy to attract and retain the talent that you have. And that was my biggest aha moment. When I said earlier, hey, I wish I would have Insperity. Insperity is all over that, attract and retaining talent. And so that was a big thing for me. And if I had to do it over again, I would do things 100% different and just focus on the people, and they would help me get to the next level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've been talking with Rob Stepen, founder, guitarist with his band, The Generations, and a leader in Insperity. Rob, thank you so much for sharing your story and your experiences.
Thank you so much for having me. What an honor. And, Newport is an awesome company. And if anybody wants to go through that, the growth and the selling of their business or the whole M&A journey, I recommend you guys 100%.
Okay, he is not being paid for this, but we are delighted to have you as a partner, of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Growth Plus Exit podcast, sponsored by Newport, a unique national business advisory firm. If you enjoyed this show, be sure to share, like, and subscribe for future episodes.